Well, they are done, finished, complete, kaput for the year at the Idaho State House. Sine die on the 88th day. Let's throw out some other numbers out to you for this last day of the session. The first session of the 67th legislature, by the way, introduced 595 bills over these days, sent 331 of them to the governor's desk, of which he signed 328 of them. 3 of them he vetoed, one of which was the first order of business on this last day of the session. So let's talk to Joe about that. How did that play out today, and what happened the rest of the day?
Yeah, and real quickly, I just want to mention, to add to your stats, I was told as recently as this afternoon there were several thousand pieces of draft legislation. So that's the stuff that doesn't even make it to the committee, and we talked about.
Nearly 600, but several thousand had ideas.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm sure plenty more didn't even make it on paper. But yes, the lawmakers I spoke with, Brian, they're thrilled to be done. But yes, they had one more major vote to take care of this afternoon before they could say goodbye. And to kind of recap for you, late yesterday, Governor Little vetoed legislation that would allow Idahoans to sue their local library if they can show a minor is getting harmful materials there. $2,500 per lawsuit, according to that proposal, and that would be the winnings. But Governor Little expressed concerns about libraries being sued into oblivion, so he vetoed the legislation. That was a session-long topic. But lawmakers have the chance to override that library bill here today, which drew questions. Would they stay and work on the new options if the veto failed? The answer for you is no. Lawmakers failed to override the governor's veto by 1 vote, and from there, they basically decided to call it a year. And I can tell you, though, through my conversations with State House leaders just this afternoon, the topic and the idea will be back next year, and there's a good chance that something on the topic of materials in libraries passes. The major hangup is the legal penalties at $2,500. I know there's negotiations around that number, so we'll see how that progresses. But yes, lawmakers are now touting their accomplishments to end the year, and if you ask Idahoans, maybe the biggest thing lawmakers accomplished this year was property taxes. Yes, lawmakers passed a package that aims to be, relief, millions of dollars in real relief. And House Speaker Mike Moyle described to me earlier the impact that families will see. But there is a caveat from the Speaker. Moyle has said for years that there's only so much the legislature can do. He says local governments need to help out.
Well, it means that you're going to get between a 10 and 25% reduction depending where you live in your property tax bill. It means that the local governments have the opportunity to add to that, so it could be even greater than that. And it means that going forward, since it's tied to the sales tax, it's going to grow. So that relief is not one time, it grows over time. So it's a good start at addressing that issue. But I still, Joe, like I said, you still got to remember, though, the state doesn't collect them and doesn't spend them. And so we've now taken an ongoing sales tax revenue to subsidize those local taxing districts. And hopefully they will do the right thing and pass those savings on, but also try to help on their end of the side, too.
So depending on where you live, you might see different property tax reduction, but the Speaker's saying 10 to 25%. But only time will really tell how far the property tax relief will go. But I've already heard conversations at the Capitol about what the next option or idea to address property tax could be. Now, meanwhile, Idaho Democrats, they also held their end of session conference today, and they expressed major concerns about the direction of the state and the legislature. Social bills are really a concern that Democrats point out. Abortion legislation, content in schools, voting rights, just to name a few. And one bill that did pass the legislature and was signed by Governor Little, as we talked about at length, it prevents minors who are transgender from getting hormone therapy or puberty blockers or transitional surgery in Idaho. Now, Democrats say that sends a message to communities in Idaho, one that is not welcoming.
This was brought by people who have no dog in the fight, who just want to tell someone else what to do. So that sends a pretty frightening message to the people of Idaho. But I think it sends a very, very disturbing message about how these lives are valued. Because I'll tell you, I met last week with several transgender teenagers and their parents. Every one of these teenagers had made a very serious suicide attempt and had ended up in an inpatient hospital situation because their gender dysphoria was so extreme. They were then put on these puberty suppressors and hormones, which have a 63% effectiveness rate at reducing suicidality. These kids are fine now. They're happy. They're getting good grades. They're excited to go on to college. But their future and their safety entirely depends on access to these medications, which are now being taken away from them by their government. We are endangering these kids' lives. I think this came out to the legislature. This is not news to them. They heard this testimony and they acted, I think, with reckless disregard as to the effect this is going to have on these kids and families, many of whom are going to be driven out of state or potentially driven to self-harm.
Idaho Democrats also touched on the belief that there will soon be several lawsuits over legislation that lawmakers approved, and that includes the transgender health care topic, but also the topic of abortion trafficking. And lawmakers passed and Governor Little signed into law a provision that makes it a crime for a minor to be taken out of state for an abortion without their parents' permission. And Brian, I've spoken with lawmakers who question, how is this legal at all? And we'll find out. I know there's some concerns about how much money could be spent over the next few months in terms of lawsuits on legislation. Republicans tell me, though, they're worth defending because they believe in the legislation they passed.
And let me throw out some more numbers to you. Speaking of, potential laws that could see a courtroom. House Bill 71, the governor's office let us know there was a lot of phone calls made, a lot of emails sent for or against. And so the numbers are, for those who wanted him to veto that bill, House Bill 71, 12,167 wanted him to, but 21,796 people wanted him to sign House Bill 71, which he did.
Wow, more than 30,000 calls in a matter of a few days.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe. So